The night had fallen heavy over the small town of Ravenshade, a forgotten settlement tucked away in the folds of misty valleys and ancient woods. It was the kind of place where stories lingered longer than the people who lived there, whispered in taverns and carried on the lips of children who dared each other to walk the lonely paths. For centuries, the townsfolk had spoken of the Lazarus House, a crumbling estate at the edge of the northern cliff, facing the storm-beaten sea. Nobody lived there anymore, not since the family perished in a fire that consumed half the mansion 50 years ago. But the house still stood, blackened and hollow, as if waiting for someone to stir the ashes of its cursed past. Marian Holloway had always been fascinated by the Lazarus House. She was a historian by trade, but by heart, she was a seeker of dark truths, of forgotten tragedies that others wished to bury. Her colleagues called her obsessive. Some even warned her that meddling with the Lazarus legend would only lead to ruin. But Marianne was determined. When she first stepped into Ravenshade on a chilly October evening, suitcase in hand and notebook clutched against her chest, she felt as though she was being pulled into the story itself, like a moth circling the flame of something it could not resist. The innkeeper, a gray-haired woman with eyes that seemed too tired for her face, hesitated when Marian asked for directions to the estate. "You don't want to go there, miss," she murmured, wringing her hands. "That place doesn't welcome the living. Folks say, once you cross its gates, you don't come back the same. Some don't come back at all." Marian smiled politely, thanked the woman, and ignored the warning. She had heard too many such tales before, and while they frightened her, they also fueled her curiosity. She had traveled the world chasing legends, the plague pits of London, the shadowed crypts in Prague, the cursed mirrors in New Orleans, but none had gripped her imagination as tightly as the Lazarus House. The following morning, armed with her camera, journal, and recorder, she walked through the twisted path that led to the estate. The closer she drew, the colder the air became, and the sunlight that had filtered through the trees seemed to dim, as though the very sky refused to shine upon that place. The gates were rusted iron, tall and ornate, crowned with sharp spears that pointed accusingly at the heavens. They creaked open at her touch, though she had expected them to be locked. It was as if the house had been waiting. Inside, the courtyard was littered with broken statues and the remains of carriages long turned to dust. The mansion loomed above, its windows like hollow eyes, its roof partially collapsed, and vines crawling like veins across its decaying walls. Still, there was a strange beauty in its ruin, a kind of tragic majesty that drew Marianne closer. She whispered the name softly under her breath, Lazarus. The sound seemed to echo unnaturally, as though the walls themselves repeated it back to her. Once inside, the stench of ash and mildew filled her lungs. The grand staircase stood cracked but proud, draped in cobwebs, its railing cold under her fingers. Broken portraits lined the walls, their faces blurred with soot and mold. Yet one portrait remained strangely intact, the painting of a man in a black suit, his eyes piercing, his lips curled into a faint smile that unsettled her deeply. She brushed the dust from the frame and read the brass plaque, Dr. Adrian Lazarus, 1871 to 1910. Her notes had spoken of him. A surgeon of great renown, Lazarus had been both admired and feared. He was said to dabble in experiments that blurred the line between life and death. Some claimed he sought to conquer mortality itself. Rumors spread of bodies stolen from graves, of patients who entered his operating room but never returned. Yet he was never tried, never condemned. His wealth and influence shielded him until the fire consumed his legacy. But according to whispers, the fire hadn't ended his story. It had only birthed something worse. As the day waned, Marianne explored the halls with growing unease. Doors seemed to open on their own. Her footsteps echoed louder than they should. And once, she swore she heard a voice whisper her name from the darkness. She tried to rationalize it, but deep down, dread gnawed at her resolve. She decided to set up her recording equipment in the main hall. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke into the recorder. October 12th. This is Marianne Holloway, documenting the Lazarus House. Initial impressions, atmosphere heavy, unsettling. Reports of haunting activity may have basis. We'll stay overnight to collect further data. Night fell like a shroud. The house grew colder, and silence pressed against her ears until it felt deafening. Mary and lit a lantern and tried to write, but the flickering shadows seemed alive, crawling across the walls. She heard footsteps above her, slow and deliberate. Heart pounding, she climbed the stairs, lantern trembling in her hand. The upper corridors stretched endlessly, lined with doors. She tried one locked. Another, also locked. But the third creaked open to reveal what once had been a study. Books lay scattered, their pages burned. In the center of the room stood a table, and on it an old leather-bound journal. Marianne's breath caught. She recognized the handwriting instantly from letters preserved in archives. It was Dr. Lazarus's own journal. She opened it carefully, the paper brittle but legible. The entries chilled her. To restore life is not blasphemy, but science. They call it unnatural, but what is unnatural about prolonging existence? God has no monopoly over death. The serum shows promise. The subject stirs, though the mind is fractured. The body remembers, but the soul resists. Failure after failure, yet I will not surrender. Death is but a disease, and I its cure. The last entry was smeared with ink, and what looked disturbingly like blood. Tonight I transcend. Tonight I shall rise again. Marianne shivered violently, snapping the journal shut. As she turned, the door slammed behind her. The lantern flickered and went out, plunging her into darkness. She stumbled toward the exit, heart hammering, but something moved in the shadows. A shape, tall and lean, stepping forward with deliberate slowness. She could hear the rasp of breath that was not quite human. Then came the voice, low and guttural, yet disturbingly articulate. "You shouldn't have come here." Marianne screamed, fumbling for her lantern. When the flame caught again, the room was empty, but the journal had vanished. From that moment, the house turned against her. Whispers followed her down every hall. Objects shifted when she turned her back, and reflections in cracked mirrors showed her face twisted, decayed, unrecognizable. She wanted to leave, but every path led her back inside. The front door, which she had left open, was now sealed shut as though fused with the wall. Hours bled together. At times, she felt she wasn't alone. Figures moved at the corner of her vision, children laughing faintly in the distance, screams echoing as if from beneath the floorboards. The truth clawed at her. Lazarus had succeeded. His work had not died with him. Somehow, he had bound himself to the house, neither living nor dead, feeding on those foolish enough to seek him.